What Really Happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Wednesday, July 17th, 2019, middle of the weekday, hump day, starting that long, slow glide down to Pauhana Friday and whatever the weekend will bring us. And, of course, Saturday is the 50th anniversary of the Apollo moon landing. We're going to be talking about that on Friday. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. That's 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, ready to answer the phone, put you on the air with your comments, questions, and observations. And a couple of anniversaries today, not positive ones here. Today is the anniversary of the day that John F. Kennedy Jr. died. And in that plane crash out on near Martha's Vineyard. And it was at a time when he was considering running for the Senate seat eventually held by Hillary Clinton. It was claimed that he was just a bad pilot, that the weather was bad. I have family on Martha's Vineyard, and the weather was just fine that night. So, lot of questions about that story. And of course, today is also the anniversary of the accidental shoot down of TWA 800 off of Long Island, and was shot down by a missile during a test of the Aegis CEC system, and it was clearly a mistake. The wrong airplane got painted by the targeting radar, and it was brought down. And then, of course, the FBI was saying, yeah, it was a missile. Then the CIA came in and said, no, it was a spark in the center tank. And we have this pretty computer animated footage to show you what we want you to think happened. And it was aerodynamically wrong. It was structurally wrong. And they actually loaded up a glass jar with butane, which is far more explosive than kerosene fumes. And they detonated it off, made a big bang, say, see, this could have exploded. And ever since then, aircraft are required to have extra equipment built into their fuel tanks, none of which has ever been used because it wasn't a fuel tank explosion that brought down that airplane. And of course, that all the witnesses who saw a missile hit the jumbo jet, well, they were just all drunks. So we don't want to listen to them. They were just drunks. Okay, now apparently over at MSNBC, they've managed to find some footage, video footage, of Donald Trump at a Mar-a-Lago party with Jeffrey Epstein from 1992. And this is obviously from before Trump banned Epstein from the whole facility. But it shows Epstein, and it shows Trump, and it shows lots of cute models. And they're trying to make a big deal out of it. Corporate media is still trying to put the focus on Trump. Trump, Epstein, Trump, Epstein, Trump, Epstein, Trump, Epstein. And they're just really trying to distance Bill Clinton, even though the pilot's logs on the Lolita Express clearly showed Clinton going down there 26 times. And on many of those same flights, there were a lot of girls. And we all know what Bill Clinton is like. But the media is trying to say, pay no attention to that pervert off there in the back part of the airplane. Donald Trump, we've got to do Donald Trump here. Now, tomorrow, we're supposed to be getting the news about whether Judge Berman is going to release Epstein on bail or on his own recognizance. Epstein's offered to put up as much as $100 million bail, which to a man of his wealth isn't really all that much. But a lot of people are starting to wonder why the delay from Monday until Thursday. And a lot of people are starting to get very concerned that Judge Berman is in fact going to release Epstein and give him an opportunity at flight. And basically saying that is somebody pulling strings for Epstein, either CIA or Mossad? Or worse, was Berman part of that pedophile network and is he being blackmailed? Okay. Apparently, Jeffrey Epstein's personal pilot has now deleted his Instagram account. Apparently, a photo surfaced of him with Kellyanne Conway. And the pilot, Larry Visoki, who goes by the screen name Captain Big Dog, is smiling as he posts with Conway, who he describes as a very humble and gracious lady. And a day after it started going viral, both it and Vysotsky's Instagram page had been deleted. But Vysotsky definitely is or was Epstein's personal pilot, and Conway was in Palm Beach at that time. All right, we're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Okay, now a lot of people are still talking about that passport that the police found when they raided Epstein's Manhattan mansion. And they got into this locked safe that had piles of diamonds and huge bundles of cash. And they found a passport listing his address as Saudi Arabia with a fake name on it. It's since come on out, the passport itself was issued by the country of Austria, even though it had the Saudi address. And Epstein's trying to explain it away by saying that he was a bounty hunter for African warlords. That, I think, is a bit of a reach. Anyway, a photo has also surfaced of Ehud Barak entering Jeffrey Epstein's New York City townhouse, trying to conceal his face. And apparently this happened on the same day as a bevy of young beauties were also spotted going into the mansion. Now, Ehud Barak is claiming he never socialized with Jeff Epstein or his girls, but we know now that Epstein, in fact, funded one of Ehud Barak's business deals. So he's fibbing, and of course Netanyahu is taking advantage of that, using it against Ehud Barak for the upcoming elections here. All right, over in the Congress, they're still screaming back and forth about Trump's comment to go back where you came from. And if you read his entire comment, in a certain context, it actually does make sense. Don't stand here and complain about how our country should be run. If you really think you're that smart, go fix the problems in the country that you came from. The big goof of his, of course, is that 3 of the 4 congresswomen were born right here in the United States, which doesn't mean that there isn't plenty to fix here in the United States of America. But unfortunately, under the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, they have specific rules to protect people, and yes, saying go back where you came from counts as discrimination. It was a reckless thing for Trump to say, and they're not letting go of it. They are not letting go of it. So Trump is in trouble over the weekend for tweeting about this group of progressive freshman representatives who House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is having some problems with. And a lot of people are starting to say these 4 congresswomen are starting to drive the Democratic agenda, which Nancy is not happy about. That's supposed to be her job. So Trump got into trouble saying that. It's being pushed up by the corporate media. And the corporate media is just, again, they're trying to frame it as Trump did a bad thing. Trump did a stupid thing. And I don't think he really understood how what he said was going to be interpreted. Apparently, over at CNN, they have been twisting embassy surveillance records. We're talking about the Ecuadorian embassy in London. And apparently these embassy surveillance records were first covered by a Spanish newspaper. And apparently Julian Assange was so concerned about security, they were holding meetings in the women's room. or maybe he was just ahead of his time on this whole transgender thing. But there was this company, UC Global, that apparently was given a lot of money to basically keep spying on what was termed the guest. And it became a lot more intense after Lenin Moreno was elected president of Ecuador in May of 2017. Morris has left the country amid more than 24 lawsuits from investors who say he defrauded them in real estate deals involving properties in Indianapolis. Now, Morris previously resided in a $1.4 million home in New Jersey. He's moved with his family to a coastal resort town in Portugal and says they will fight the lawsuits from over there. But he said that it was actually his Indianapolis business partner, Bert Whalen, and his company, Ocean Point, that resulted in the losses. So we'll see what happens with that. Okay, and the goofier thing that's happening today, Representative Al Green has just introduced articles of impeachment against President Donald Trump, and they may actually go down to a vote sometime today, certainly toward the end of the week here. And his entire case for impeachment of Donald Trump are the tweets against these 4 freshman congresswomen who Al Green seems to feel are beneath the dignity of the president and the government. And so that's it. They want to impeach him over his tweet. And no doubt we're going to get the chorus chiming in from Maxine Waters, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Rashid Tlaib, Ayanna Pressley, Ilhan Omar, Nancy Pelosi certainly, and Dianne Feinstein. We can expect to hear from all of them. This is a very, very reach. It's a long reach here. But at this point, it is up in the air whether the House will vote to send the resolution to committee or to table it, which would kill it, or vote to simply proceed forward with it. And in addition, the House is also voting today to hold U.S. Attorney General William Barr and Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross in criminal contempt of Congress for withholding information about the administration's failed bid to add a citizenship question to the 2020 census. So much political infighting. I've never seen it like this. And I don't think that normally Congress wants the American people to see them behaving like this, but they are behaving like children. There's no question about it. Well, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez now has a challenger in the 2020 election, and it is Sherry S. Murray, who's a Republican immigrant, legal, from Jamaica. And she's going to try and unseat Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, which I think is probably going to be easier because Alexandria keeps saying such dumb things. Alrighty. Apparently, Hillary and Bill Clinton went to a Billy Joel concert. They were announced from the stage. There was a smattering of applause. But overwhelmingly, it was all booing and catcalls. And so if Hillary is still thinking about running next year, that may give her pause. She's not really very popular with the American people. Getting back to Ilhan Omar, it is looking more and more like she committed immigration fraud, passport fraud, tax fraud. There is now a petition circulating demanding a congressional investigation. And a lot of people are still talking about her alleged marriage to her younger brother in order to help him become a citizen. And even that now has a new wrinkle because apparently in the Somali community, it's well known that her brother is actually gay. So the marriage is definitely fake. Let's see, article published in the Minneapolis Star Tribune. Ilhan Omar's illegal use of campaign funds to cover travel costs. Also talked about the marriage. And is this the best that we can do here? All right, let's talk about Joe Biden. A few days ago, there was a rumor circulating that he was going to drop out of the race for health reasons. I guess that was fake news because we're not hearing anything about it. But he does have a vulnerability because back in 2002, Joe Biden voted in favor of the Iraq War. And that's a tremendous weakness with the American people tired of all these endless wars. Barack Obama successfully used Hillary's pro-war vote in 2008 to damage her. Trump did exactly the same thing in 2016. If you voted for the Iraq War, that's a strike against you. Got to come out with something to counter that. Apparently, the reparations movement has a new fan or a new sponsor. Senator Chuck Schumer is out there saying racism is the poison of America. The legacy of slavery and Jim Crow are still with us. They're really pandering to the race issue for next year's elections. So apparently there is a new bill. Schumer gave his support to it. The bill was proposed by Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey. Texas Representative Sheila Jackson Lee would form a commission to study ways to make an apology for slavery and make payments to the descendants of slaves. This measure was introduced back last April. Well, I think we could take the descendants of the slaves out to the cemeteries, and they could sit there and listen for the slave owners to make an apology. Don't think it's going to work. But again, why are we responsible for what our ancestors did, good or bad? And when you realize how few people actually owned slaves back then, and how many slaves were owned by fellow blacks, you can see what a complex issue it is. Basically, the Democrats are buying votes. Vote for us, we'll take money away from the white people and give it to you. Well, that's definitely going to involve a fight. My ancestors never owned slaves. In fact, my ancestors ran a station on the Underground Railroad. Where are my reparations? All right, shortly before the midterm elections, there was a series of these pipe bombs mailed to prominent critics of President Trump. And a gentleman by the name of Cesar Sayoc is about to be sentenced. He pled guilty to the explosives-related charges, and he faces a mandatory 10-year prison term and possibly up to life. Now, Sayoc has said he never intended to injure anyone, and that's a claim his lawyers will likely argue is supported by the recently released FBI report that confirms what we told you here on this radio show. Those bombs would not have detonated. They weren't designed to work correctly. We pointed that out on our show, and now the FBI, all these months later, has come on out and said, yep, absolutely, they would not have worked. All right, we're going to take a break here for commercials, and we'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And once again, Republic Broadcasting has their hands out to you. We need your help. And the postal address where you can send a check, money order, or if you prefer anonymity cash, is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. The phone number where you can make a credit or debit card donation or pledge to be a recurring subscriber is 800-724-2719, extension 1 during business hours, extension 3 at all other times. Okay, we're going to go to the phones here to Joe in Tennessee. Aloha, Joe. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, I heard you talking about Trump's tweet And you seem to be of the impression that it was a mistake and that it was hot-headed and whatever.
Well, it's certainly bad optics.
Right, but I think that his tweets are very well thought out. I think that you might think it's a mistake politically, but I think he knows exactly what he thinks he's doing, which is to try to bring these people up as the face of the Democratic Party. It's kind of like when he had his issues, his tweets against Colin Kaepernick. I mean, he picks fights with people that are genuinely disliked by Middle America, and these four women are pretty much despised by Middle America. And then he lets the lefties and Pelosi go out there and defend him. I mean, it's actually brilliant politics. It's part of the reason why he sits in the Oval Office today. So I think a lot of people think Trump is hot-headed and he low blood sugar. In the middle of the night, he tweets these things out. I don't think so at all. I think this is calculated. I think you can discuss whether you think it's smart or not, but I think the way it's painted, like he's running around in a rage, is not what's really happening. I think he's playing a masterful game of cat and mouse myself, and I think he's also an expert at brand marketing, and he's branding the Democrats. I mean, this is part of the genius of Trump as a businessman. He's always been good at calling, Jeb Bush low energy and coming up with names, for people to brand them. So he's branding the Democrats as these four horsemen, crazy ladies that are too radical to be put in power. I think it's a brilliant tactical move. And, I think if you really break down his tweet, there's nothing racist in it. He did say go back, but he said, and that might be a violation of some equal rights thing, but you got to look at what he said before to go back. He says, if you hate America, if you don't like this country, then go back. So it's not like he's saying, go back to your country. He's saying, if you don't like it here, go back to your country. And that's a big difference.
Well, that was a big goof right there, because 3 of those 4 women were born here in the United States of America. Where Trump messed up is the Democrats were fighting amongst themselves. They were literally self-destructing, and he gave them a new target to unite them. And these four congresswomen, they're now being portrayed as victims.
Well, no, they're being portrayed as like leaders of the Democratic Party now, which is exactly what Trump wants. But I do find one of the ironic things, which is classic Trumpism, is what happens after Trump hysteria or because of Trump hysteria, was that Nancy Pelosi violates 200 years of House, a rule of 200 years of decorum in the House by calling the President of the United States a racist. So there they are going to, have a censure of the president for his lack of decorum, and she literally violates the rules of the House that were put in by Thomas Jefferson of all people. Yes. In the process, and it's like I said, this is classic Trump. Whereas in their hysteria and their craziness to get at Trump, they actually do what they accuse him of doing. And it's magical, and I really enjoy watching it. The other thing I wanted to say real quick was I read on Zero Hedge that Trump is sending Rand Paul to meet the Iranian foreign minister to try to do out of the mainstream and try to have some kind of discussions. And I think that what other presidential candidate would do such a bold move but Trump? I mean, Bush would never do that. It would always be a war hawk. Any of the other Republicans, what's his name from Florida? Are you kidding? All these neocons. So I think that we should applaud Trump for doing something like that. I mean, I like Rand Paul. He's obviously not a war hawk. He's like his dad. He's an isolationist. And for Trump to do something like that is really a wonderful sign that, he likes, he's reaching out olive branches. He doesn't want war. And I think that's a very, something that should be applauded and commented on. I don't know if you were going to get at it later, but.
No, I really wasn't, because there are other signals going back and forth between the United States and Iran over their missiles. And, Rand Paul may find himself up to his neck in this mess. Anyway, listen. We're going to have to agree to disagree. I think Trump mishandles his tweets. And we voted for a leader, not a tweeter, to paraphrase one of our callers.
Well, I voted for a winner,
Joe,
not a loser.
Joe, I don't think he's a winner. We got to let you go and take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Now, over at Blacklisted News, there's an interesting story. And the gist of it is that members of the FBI and the Justice Department's top brass are using burner phones for their communications so that they can basically evade federal investigators and lawmakers. And this is the whistle's being blown on this by FBI insiders. And apparently this comes on the heels of news that the FBI deleted thousands of text messages between anti-Trump FBI agents before investigators could review their content. So it's one giant cover-up from border to border. And it's basically, we're seeing the FBI and Department of Justice top officials employing the telecom habits of drug cartel bosses. And by the way, it does break federal law regarding record keeping as well. Now, speaking of drug cartels, Mexican drug lord El Chapo has been sentenced to life plus 40 years, was a mandatory sentence. He's being told to forfeit $12.6 billion to the U.S. government. He stayed silent throughout most of his sentencing hearing, except for one moment where he complained about the torturous conditions in jail. But $12.6 billion, there's your border wall, right there. So we'll see what happens on that. Okay, back to the phones. Rick in Arizona. Aloha, Rick. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. I'm just calling in to try to put up some confusion what's going on with this Trump thing. Let's not confuse Trump with these women as he's anti-immigration. Trump is frustrated with these women because they're wise to the Jews and Zionism. As far as immigration...
Wait a minute. Back up. They're not Jewish.
I'm talking about they are wise to the Jews and Zionism. These women are in that camp of anti-Zionism, okay?
Well,
so
Ilhan Omar just really introduced a bill supporting the BDS movement.
I know. Trump doesn't like these women, not because of immigration. It's because these women are wise to the Zionism, right? They don't like Zionism. They're in the anti-Zionism branch of the Democrat Party. If Trump wanted to stop immigration, he would put troops on the other side of the Rio Grande. We have troops in every country. And he has Title VIII, and we all know that these judges are running cover for him. He can stop this immigration, and he can end the problem down there. And people are thinking that Trump is trying to play the white nationalist thing. He's against immigration. No, he's not. He is against these women because they are bringing the issue of Zionism to the surface, and it's making him nervous. Trump should go back to Israel, where he came from. Okay? If you want to go back somewhere, Trump is making Israel great again. If he wants to make America great again, he can get a handle on this immigration problem. All right?
Yes.
The Chamber of Commerce in this country wants this cheap labor. And don't kid yourself. They want to reduce the minimum wage in this country. And these people that are coming into this don't even speak their language of the country they're coming in. They're talking Tex-Mex. They don't speak Spanish fluently. They don't speak English fluently. These people are great $5 an hour workers in the future. But this has nothing to do with Trump being a tough guy on immigration. He is being tough on these women because they are in the anti-Zionist camp of the Democrat Party, and white women in the Democrat Party don't have the gonads to come up and talk about it. Thanks for taking my call.
All right, you got it. Thanks a lot for the phone call. We're going to let you go. The phone lines are open. Okay, pardon me. Europe has found a way to circumvent U.S. sanctions on Iran, and the governments of France, Germany, and the United Kingdom have developed a special purpose vehicle to enable European businesses to maintain trade with Iran without breaking U.S. sanctions. That special purpose vehicle known as Instex is now up and running. And the three governments announced the successful implementation of Instex at a meeting of the Joint Commission of the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action on June 28th of this year. The meeting was chaired on behalf of the EU by the Secretary General of the European External Action Service, Helga Schmid, and was attended by representatives of China, France, Germany, the United Kingdom, and Iran. Now, Donald Trump is out there insisting that the United States is not seeking regime change in Iran, and that his entire goal is they can't have a nuclear weapon. Well, job accomplished. Iran didn't have a nuclear weapon in the first place, and they're not building one now, according to the IAEA. So if that really is the only goal for the United States, it's been achieved. Declare victory and go home. Of course, that's not what we're hearing. We're hearing more talk, and ultimately we're seeing a lot of demonization of Iran's government and a lot of attempts to sort of play up the suffering of the Iranian people, much of which is caused by the sanctions. So when Trump says the U.S. is not seeking regime change in Iran, I don't believe him. Regime change is what the United States is about. Now, Iran and the United States are sending conflicting signals on possible talks regarding Iran's ballistic missiles. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has claimed that Iran has signaled a willingness to negotiate on the matter of the ballistic missiles. Other U.S. officials aren't so sure, and Iranian officials are also telling conflicting stories on the matter. Now, Alireza Mir Yousefi, the spokesman for Iran's UN mission, said Iran's missiles are absolutely and under no condition negotiable with anyone or any country. And that's certainly the position Ayatollah Ali Khamenei has long taken. And apparently Pompeo's belief that talks are possible didn't come out of thin air. Rather, Foreign Minister Javad Zarif suggested in the U.S. was willing to, if the U.S. was willing to cut off arms sales to other countries in the Middle East, that Iran's missiles might also be up for negotiation. That sounds very reasonable to me. Now, it's probably going to be a non-starter with President Trump, who's obsessed with growing arms sales. But yeah, we'll give up our ballistic missiles if you stop selling ballistic missiles to countries that don't like us. So that makes a lot of sense here. So Iran is basically saying the U.S. ending arms sales to the Middle East would open a hypothetical path toward missile talks. Alrighty. The other day we had a lot of callers on the line talking about the very obvious neocon war hawks that are throughout the Trump administration, and I'm afraid it's getting worse. The latest rumor is that Director of National Intelligence Dan Coates will be replaced by Fred Fleets, who's a former NSC Executive Secretary, CIA analyst, Trump Chief of Staff, Bolton enforcer, and CEO of the Center for Security Policy. Now that last one, that's a problem. The Center for Security Policy is a project launched by Frank Gaffney Jr., who's like this intense Islamophobic way out there on the neocon fringe. So yeah, it's getting worse. We're getting more war hawks, we're getting more neocons. Speaking of war hawks, they're in the middle of the confirmation hearings for the new Secretary of Defense, and Mark Esper, of course, is getting ready to inherit a whole slew of U.S. wars around the world. Interestingly enough, his hearing before the Senate Armed Services Committee didn't really talk about the wars. Esper was faced with questions about his history as a lobbyist for a major arms maker and how that was going to fit in with his new job. He was asked exactly 0 questions about the ongoing wars. Now, Esper assured senators he sees the big picture, and his focus was heavily on the need for the Senate to spend vastly more on weaponry for the U.S. military, which would be his job as defense secretary, which is largely just a scaled-up version of his lobbying past. But I can understand why these senators weren't asking about the wars. The wars are unpopular. They don't want to talk about the war on TV. They don't want the American people thinking about the wars between now and the election. Over at Judicial Watch, Tom Fitton has come on out with a statement. He's stating the obvious here, but great that he's making the noise, saying that there is more than enough evidence to reopen the Clinton email criminal investigation. And there's a huge amount of evidence. And the FBI basically, James Comey came on out and said, yeah, she's guilty. She didn't mean to do wrong, so we're not going to press charges. But yeah, she's guilty of these felony violations of Title 18. I'd like to see Fitton get out there and do something about it. But I fear that the Clintons really are untouchables. The big question we'll find out tomorrow is just how untouchable Jeff Epstein is here. Over in Israel, Israeli Jews question Palestinians' loyalty. They don't want them in government. And this is that whole Jewish identity that Benjamin Netanyahu is campaigning on. So they don't want the Palestinians in the government. Now, I'm sure you can imagine if we sat here and said we don't want Jews in our government, the screaming would just be everywhere. Ooh, you anti-Semite, you Jew hater. Israel's dealing with another problem right now. Who to blame for Gaza's environmental crisis? And we know that a lot of it has to do with the occupation, the rationing of basic supplies like water, the cutting off of electricity so that their water treatment plant doesn't work and raw sewage flows into the ocean. But Israel doesn't want to take the blame for that. So now they're trying to figure out how they can blame Gaza for it. How do we make Gaza look bad, look responsible for the water problems? So they're trying to go on out there and say, well, this is all because of this ongoing conflict between Hamas and the Palestinian authorities. That's what's causing all the environmental damage. I'm sure the conflict isn't helping. But, you know, Israel has been inflicting collective punishment on Palestine for decades. And that includes shortages of water, shortages of electricity, shortages of medicine. Okay. Starting today, the House Foreign Affairs Committee will begin to mark up a number of measures, including a resolution that condemns the global boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement. Despite concerns about the bill being constitutional, it is currently supported by 70% of the Democratic caucus. Now, as I mentioned to that caller a little while ago, Ilhan Omar has introduced a bill that supports BDS. So we'll see where that goes. Probably not very far here. Alrighty. There is an organization called If Not Now, and it's a Jewish organization, and they're making Palestine an issue in the Democratic race by posting videos of young people asking the candidates if they would bring pressure on Israel to end the occupation. And the group has gotten evasive answers from Joe Biden and Beto O'Rourke, a no from Cory Booker, a yes from Pete Buttigieg, and a nervous affirmation from Elizabeth Warren. And of course, this has provoked an intense rage from the Israel lobby, AIPAC and such. You know, how dare you do that? How dare you put them on the spot? Now, Israel prides itself on having bipartisan support in Congress. The last thing they need is a split up. Okay, we're going to go back to the phones here. Al in Canada, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. You were just mentioning something about dumping raw sewage into the Mediterranean Sea and people pointing fingers. Palestine is an open-air prison.
Yes.
We all know that. The density there is just brutal. And no matter what happens, there is going to be pollution runoff into that Mediterranean Ocean because of that. Victoria, up in Canada, in BC, has been dumping raw sewage into the ocean for decades. Decades. It is a fact. It's been all over the news up here in Canada. Quebec dumps raw sewage into the St. Lawrence River constantly. So it's not really anything new. We have a bunch of tankers coming, sea containers coming back from Asia that were filled with, Mike, they call it recyclable plastic. It's not. It's just, imagine like a peanut butter container where about 10% of the peanut butter is still in that container, times a bazillion. That's kind of what's all in there, and it stinks, and it's rotting, and it's disgusting. And it's shipped over there thinking that the Asians are somehow supposed to take care of our garbage.
Well, they used to, but they stopped, I think it was 2 years ago.
Yes, even in the United States, too.
Yes.
They stopped taking the United States garbage. For lack of a better word, it is garbage. I'm glad you brought this up. I mean, it's a shame what's going on in Palestine, and I'm afraid that because of Trump, not a lot's going to happen over the next decade. Let's just say.
Yeah, but I don't think it's just Trump. We've been waiting for something to happen, and it hasn't. Anyway, Al, stay on the line. Yes. I'm going to put you on hold. We'll be back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're talking with Al in Canada, and we're talking about what do we do with all the leftover waste that humans generate? We do generate a lot of waste, and some places deal with it in a responsible manner. Others do not. But a big problem is that up until about 2 years ago, China was buying our plastic waste because they were saying they could actually recycle it. They were going to make it into polyester clothing and various products like that. But apparently that didn't pencil out. I guess they used up so much water washing the peanut butter out of the peanut butter jar that they just went into the red. So about 2 years ago, they told all these other nations, no, we're not interested in buying your leftover recyclables. And at that point, people are saying, you might as well just throw it in the trash. Forget about the recycling bin. And, here in Hawaii, we have recycling bins, but when the trash truck comes, they just throw it all in together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And the stuff doesn't biodegrade. If anything, it leaches contaminants into the soil, into the groundwater.
Yes.
Right into the lakes, right into the streams, rivers, lakes, and oceans. And then we wonder why we're having all these problems. Not to mention the overfishing. But getting back to, we don't want to gloss over this Gaza Strip thing. I mean, it doesn't really matter. Well, everything matters, but it doesn't really matter if Israel is trying to, basically make these people wallow in their own filth. There are over 5,000 people per square kilometer in that area. I mean, and they're all basically crammed together.
Yes.
Because they've been forced into this open air prison. This is something I will never ever get over. as long as I live, because I mean it's so recent, and we can see it. You can see it, and I don't know, like those Congress women in your country. They're trying to that one Omar. She puts forth something about the BDS movement. I think that's great, and I wish politicians up in this country had the fortitude that woman obviously has. But in the end, I think religion,
yes,
should be separate from politics and law. Period.
Well, that was certainly the way it was set up.
Yes, and not only in your country, but I think all over the world. The world would be so much of a better place if that small thing could happen, but it's not going to. As long as you have guys like Trump in power, and I can sway either way with this guy, but when he's wrong, he's wrong. And that one caller that said Trump is going to make Israel great again, of course he is. His son-in-law is Jewish.
Yep.
So,
he's friends
anyway,
with
I can hear the
Netanyahu.
music
Anyway,
again.
listen,
I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Al, I got to let you go. We got to do station identification. We have another caller waiting on the line, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And we're going to go back to a phone call from Terry in California. Aloha, Terry. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, I think we ought to be supporting Omar for the same reasons that Rick and Al mentioned. I mean, turn her loose on AIPAC, turn her loose on Elliot Abrams, turn her loose on the Zionists, and get Tlaib to go with her as a partnership. We shouldn't be bad-mouthing her, I don't think. And all that stuff you mentioned probably came from the intelligence agencies run by the Zionists that want to get rid of her. She's not going to be long for this world in politics anyway. She's going to be gone because they want her gone, because that's what she's doing. She's doing the BDS thing, which I support, and nobody else is going to do it. So you might look at her as your watchdog that's caged up all day in the back, and you turn her loose in the junkyard at night, to protect yourself. Nobody else is going to do it. Kennedy was the last hope. And when they got rid of him, they just became more and more embedded in the culture and the government. Now they're very powerful, and they're going to be so hard to get rid of. But anyway, the other thing I wanted to mention is we got to oppose that impeachment against Trump, because who do you get? You get Mike Pence, and he's a real neocon. You might as well elect Hillary Clinton if you're going to elect him, because he turned everything over to the Zionists. He's a Zionist Christian, and besides that, just look at some of the votes that he did when he was in Congress, and they'll clue you into what he's going to do as president. What do you think, Mike?
Going back and doing a little bit of due diligence, but it almost seems to stay, and maybe it's just because I'm getting to be old, it almost doesn't seem to matter who's sitting in that Oval Office, because again, nothing changes. The wars go on. The rich get richer. The poor get poorer. I love this little article that came out the other day where one of the Disney heiresses toured the Disneyland theme park anonymously and just said it was absolutely deplorable how the workers were being treated, where even after having jobs at the happiest place on earth, they had to go rummaging through dumpsters trying to find stuff to eat. And,
right.
I haven't had to do that since I was in college.
Yeah, the other thing is, when Trump came out with this task force that was going around and going to get the illegals, these farmers out in, I forgot what's, Alabama, they were all of a sudden out of business. All their workers took off. It's illegal. You get a work permit for those farms or less of what the Mexicans did. because it's not so easy. I mean, you got certain muscles they've trained over the years in their body to be able to do that kind of work. And there's a technique to it as well that the Americans didn't know. They lasted one day and they had all these pains, and they only made $30. These little buckets they have that they fill the vegetables and fruit in, they get 40 cents a bucket. So they hustle, and they can make good money. Well, for them, like 70 or 75 bucks a day, and the Americans made 30 bucks a day, and they lasted one day. So we need those people, and that's all we need. You know, go for those people. I say give them a permit, let them keep going, doing what they're doing, and, you know, hands off of them. What do you think about that?
I have to disagree with you. I understand that they're familiar with the agricultural process and that they can be very good workers, but I'm concerned about the American people who are out of jobs right now, and the fact that having all of these illegal immigrant workers is only justifying the lowering of wages and salaries even further, to the point where we have people who've got full-time jobs who are still homeless, who are sleeping in their cars.
Yeah, but
you know, that's not a healthy
I'm concerned
economy.
with that too. But I don't think the farm workers are going to affect that. In fact, Americans can't do it. They just can't do it.
Well,
Farmers are
more and
going
more
broke, and
farm
it's
work
gonna
is
add to the
becoming
food
automated,
shortage.
and more farm work is becoming automated anyway. So I don't think that there's going to be that much of a need for braceros, if you will. But boy, our food supply in the heartland of this country, what a battering it is taking between, as you say, these guys running off and abandoning the fields, the flooding, the storms. There are going to be food shortages, and I got an email from somebody saying already the shelves of canned food at the supermarket are starting to look a little thin. Anyway, Terry, we're going to let you go. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network, and we're going to go back to the phones to Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha, Dustin. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Anybody who doesn't like what I got to say, you better turn off the YouTube stream or the radio right now, because I know some people don't want to listen when I call in, which is unfortunate because it's great to hear everybody's views of the world, you know. Yeah, on Mike, on Al, not only do we export our debt to the world, we export our garbage to the world, and unfortunately for us, both are coming to an end. You know, along with the West, Canada, you know, Australia. Because if anybody can go on YouTube and watch the garbage that, you know, the recycling / garbage, you know, because there's so many different plastics. A lot of it isn't recyclable. Like styrofoam has a recycling, goes in the garbage. You know, because I guess it costs too much money to, you know, to recycle. You know, so. Yeah, it's a sad state of affairs, the garbage. I watched a YouTube video, Mike, on Thailand, how all the people going on vacation over there, they leave garbage, and they got to send out people every morning to the beaches to pick up garbage in the water, garbage on the beach. So, very slobby. Human beings are slobby. It's sad to say, you know, we're just slobby, you know. But having said that, Mike, Trump $12 billion of El Chapo's money. Mike, it's July 16th today.
Yes.
Okay.
Actually, it's the 17th.
17th. We've been talking about this for months. There's money available. There's money available. Well, this wall's never going to be built. I mean, come on, people. we talk about it all the time. The wall. It's never going to happen. Either Trump or the powers that be, it's not going to happen. Because it should have been happening already. You know, if China was given the so it's not going to happen. And, you know, Trump's not a genius. I mean, Joe from Tennessee's kind of right with the tweets when it comes to Omar and them, you know, where he's trying to isolate them. That's the That's the Democratic Party. But there was just a poll that come out. I mean, I don't know how much of it's true or not, but it shows that what Trump says to them is wrong. And Mike, you know, I've been listening to you a while. You know, when John from Barbados was calling in, he was calling before I even found out about your show. I remember a caller really pissed me off. He called in, sounded like a militant, you know, military type or CIA. And he goes, "If you don't like it here, Mike, leave." That kind of, I don't like that attitude, because if you don't like the way the wars are going, you don't support the troops. If you don't like it here, leave. You know, it can mean anything. So I don't like that. That can be spun anyway. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, I just don't like that. I don't know. What do you think? I mean, but you know, he said that to you, and it just aggravated me. Like, it's not we don't like it here. It's like, this country's got issues, man. Like, the government's crap. Like, I mean, that's just the bottom line. Well, and nothing's being fixed.
I don't remember John of Barbados saying that to me, but
No, John from Barbados didn't say that, but that was during when John from Barbados was calling in when I started listening to you. Some guy called in.
Yeah, we get calls like that. It's best to just ignore them. And yeah, there's the attitude out there, and you've said it, there's a choice. You realize there are problems with the country, and are you going to try and do something about it, or are you just going to leave? And obviously, for the last quarter of a century, Claire and I have been trying to fix some of the problems with this country.
Mike, I'm going to be honest with you, it's unfixable. It's unfixable. The American people, not all of us, but a lot of us, is unfixable. And just the government's just totally unfixable, because it doesn't want to be fixed because it likes it the way it is. And it's just going to get worse and worse and worse and worse until it just, like you said, it just goes the way of the dodo bird.
Well, I've kind of changed my focus from fixing it to getting ready to rebuild from the ground up.
Isn't that sad, Mike? Our founding fathers, George Washington, fought against an empire, the British. We've only just to become one and be like them or worse than them. And nobody cares. Nobody probably in the British Empire, besides a few people, cared of what they become or were, like in Rome and history.
Well, all the money's being spent on war. We're on a wartime economy. They don't want to admit it, but that's the reason there's no money. That's the reason they're trying to... Go ahead.
No, go ahead. It's your show, Mike.
Okay. Yeah, that's really what's going on. The vast majority of the money is being spent on the military, and there's very little left over. You've got the various entitlements to try and keep the people happy, like SNAP, food stamps, and there's hardly anything left. And that's why the roads are still broken. And plus the unbelievable amount of corruption that we're seeing at all levels of our government is basically shaving off even more of that cash.
And they don't know how it is in the real world, Mike, because they all live in their virtual bubbles. The East Coast, the West Coast, they live in these bubbles to where they go to the parties with the rich and the famous and the billionaires like Epstein and all that. They don't know what it's like in the real world. Even if they came from the real world, once they get to that world, they forget about us or the people they came from.
Yep.
And they'll never remember. And Mike, before I get off the phone, I just want to, this was coming from the White House, that by the end of the year, the trade deficit is going to be to $1 trillion. And that is, that's not good, people. And also,
are you sure that's the trade deficit or it's just the deficit? Because I know the government spending deficit is going to be about $1 trillion by the end of the year.
Well, maybe that's it, the regular deficit. But yeah. I thought that wasn't the trade deficit at $728 billion by now. It's a lot.
Well, let me take a look like here. That. Boy, that would make $2 trillion.
I'm going to finish by saying, if Trump lied, he said we're winning against the Chinese because their economy's slowing down. They went from 6.7% GDP to 6.2, and that's because they slowed down on the infrastructure building in their country. But they got all brand new infrastructure now, so they're only 0.1% exports. And I don't know if a lot of people know that 0.1% of their output is to exports of product. The rest is imports. So I mean, Trump's not telling us the truth that we're winning with the trade war. And Mike, by the way, if Trump didn't give these socialist handouts to the farmers, do you think they would vote for him the next election if they weren't able to fix their tractors or survive?
Yeah, probably not. But farm subsidies have always been it's kind of like Social Security. You don't mess with that. It's political minefield.
But at the end of the day, it's still socialism, and it's still a bailout, basically, right? Like AIG or GM at that point.
Well, basically, it's what allows food prices to be kept low.
Before I get off the phone, that's right. Food shortages. This was from Kroger's. Somebody from Kroger's in an internal document says they got multiple shortages in canned vegetables. So That tells you something, people. All right, Mike, have a good show.
All right, thanks an awful lot. And we're going to switch over to Art off the grid. Aloha, Art. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. I wanted to call in response to the caller 2 callers ago.
Yep.
When he was talking about white people went in there and they lasted one day, couldn't do the job. I am of Irish and Dutch descent. I'm as white as it gets. I am the cracker from hell. Okay? I'm straight up stone hardcore white trailer trash. But, when I was homeless, when I first became homeless in 1983, my very first job was side by side with my father in an orange groves in Florida, working migrant work, harvesting the oranges for Minute Maid. This was in 1983, and I did this for 3 years. It's not that white people won't do it or can't handle it because of the hard work. It's because we understand the value of our labor, and we're not going to work for dirt wages. Because back then, I don't know, he can believe it or not, working the orange groves in Florida, I was making $90 a day. Now, if they're making $20 today, they're getting raped. Because I was making $90 a day. That's how hard I worked, and I'm as white as they get. So I kind of take exception to that kind of call right there, because that's no. And there were a lot of white people out there doing it. But when the wages started reflecting more to we can hire illegals and pay them less, well, that kind of squeezed us out of doing that labor because we weren't going to work for those wages. But fortunately, I found lumping, which is loading and unloading tractor trailers, and I did that for 5 years, working the loading docks, loading and unloading 18-wheelers. It's not that we can't handle it. It's that we don't want to work for those dirt wages like that. We know the value of our labor.
Yes. No, that's really what it's all about. And we've got to find a way to drive up wages and salaries for the legal American citizens, or this economy is going to fall apart. And it's amazing to hear all these business owners and CEOs just whine and cry that, a new minimum wage is going to ruin the economy. Well, you're sitting in a business that doesn't have any customers coming into it because the customers can't afford to come in there.
Yeah, and you know what ended me working the loading docks, loading and unloading all these trailers? Yeah. This was going on during the mid to late 80s when I was doing this, loading and unloading. Because remember, I worked the orange groves on and off, during season for 3 years, but I had to supplement that with work throughout the summer months because there's no picking oranges in the middle of summer. So I had to do tobacco in Kentucky during the spring.
Art, I got to let you go.
Put regulations on.
Art, I got to let you go. We got to do a commercial break. We'll be right back. Well, you know, I'm going to take a guess here that we are not going to be back on the air by the end of my show.
No, probably not.
And I'll leave my studio up and running so that if that changes, somebody can call me and I can get back on the air. But I'm going to sign off on the YouTube channel. And